Good evening, friends. As Marina said, today is our last meeting in the Living Theosophy series, where we have been exploring this very interesting book, which is Light on the Path. Probably, as you have noticed, it's not a book to be read just like a novel. It's not even a book on knowledge, knowledge about life or the spiritual laws, as they are sometimes called. It's more a book about the path, about what things we need to let grow in ourselves in order to be able to discover what we really are. And the Buddha said, I think I mentioned this in this series, the Buddha said that to conquer the self, the lower self, we would say in Theosophy, it's more difficult than to win a battle to 1,000 men 1,000 times. So the idea is that in this time where ideas of enlightenment and nirvana and all these things are so well known, there may be the idea in people's minds that this is an easy achievement. We have also these philosophies that say we are already enlightened, which is true from a certain point of view. But as we can see in the theosophical approach, always the idea is that it's not something easy. It's the highest thing you can aspire in the universe, in the cosmic evolution as a human being. So obviously it's not something that is that easy. It is difficult to be, a scientist, a good sportsman, or all these things require a lot of dedication. Of course, to realize what is the truth of life requires also dedication. But at the same time, every little step that we take brings its own result. It's not that we have to make an effort and at the end we will have some kind of reward. Every little step, every growth that happens in ourselves is part of a process that allows us to live deeply, to try to touch or be closer to the essence of what we are and what life is. So I wanted to summarize tonight, or to take a few of the rules that Light on the Path talks about in the second part. We went through the first part more thoroughly because that is what we have to do at this stage in our growth, what we have to try to get closer to. The second part is for a person that has realized the real self. However, it's very important to know about these things. First, as I said, because that gives us the sense of direction. That shows us towards what kind of life we have to move little by little. And second, because we can always apply these things. In our lives we have like smaller cycles of growing, certain kind of enlightenment, a small enlightenment, a breakthrough, and then a new stage begins. So all these things that we read in the books are useful at whatever stage we are. Life moves in cycles. That's one of the main teachings in Theosophy. So even if we cannot live fully what Light on the Path describes here, we can have a kind of reflection of this in our life, like something that is reflected on maybe a more limited aspect or a more limited way, but that is nevertheless important for us to break through to our next stage of growth. So the first rule in the second part, after the person has seen the truth. Now, what the aspirant has to do is to actually cement that perception, so to say. First we see the truth, but then we lose it, and we need to make it a reality in ourselves. Many mystics, like Plotinus, for example, he was a Neoplatonist. He said that he had this vision of the One a few times in his life. And after he had this vision, he lost it. Of course, there is a change every time that there is an insight, that you realize something. So you are never the same. But we have to realize repeatedly the same truth, probably deeper and deeper, until we become that truth. So in this part of of Light on the Path, the idea is to be able to become the whole truth. We saw it, now we try to become it. So the first rule, it says, stand aside in the coming battle, and though thou fightest, be not thou the warrior. The Light on the Path talks here in several times in terms of a battle probably between the lower nature and the higher nature. It's a way of saying, we could use many different metaphors for this, but many times the lower nature feels it as a battle, because it is even in our normal life, we have a desire that is not healthy. And if we want to overcome that desire, there is a sense of struggle. Now, as we are going to see, the struggle at this point is different. But whenever we want to reshape any aspect of our personality, there is certain battle there, because our personality is alive. As anything in nature, it wants to survive, and it will produce some opposition. If you try to kill an ant, that we shouldn't, but if you try to kill an ant, the ant will try to run away from you, will try to survive. The same with our emotions, our reactions, whatever is in nature is always trying to survive, because another theosophical teaching is that everything in nature is alive. Everything is an expression of this one life. Our body, our emotions, our psychological complexes, they are alive. They have an elemental consciousness of their own. But Light on the Path says, stand aside in the coming battle. And though you have to fight it, don't be the warrior. And the second one says, look for the warrior inside and let him fight in thee. The person, the aspirant at this point, saw or realized or perceived who he really is. And then he's caught back into the personality. But now he knows that he's not the emotions, the mind, the body. Body, emotions, mind are part of him. They are like, sometimes I gave this example, it's like if we are riding a horse. We need a horse to go here and there to do whatever we need to do, especially in the past where there were no other means to move around. And though we need the horse, we are not the horse. And if the horse wants to do something that has nothing to do with what we have to do, then we bring the horse back to the path that we have to go through. So in the same way, our personality wants many different things. It's alive, it has its own desires, but we as a consciousness, little by little, learn to direct the personality. If we really have a deep relationship with the horse, we take care of it, we make sure that it's healthy, well fed, and there is a sense of love for the horse. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we let the horse do whatever the horse wants to do. There are times when the horse can do whatever he wants, but when he needs to serve a purpose, then we take care that the purpose is done. So something like that is the relationship with our personality. Many times it's okay, the personality can enjoy whatever the personality wants. But when the personality wants something that is not right or that is taking you away from what you need to do, then you can take hold of the personality and say, we will do this. So the idea is that the aspirant realized who he really is, and yet the personality is not completely tamed. So that's why there is a kind of battle. But the warrior, the aspirant realized that the warrior is not at the level of the personality. The warrior is this inner warrior. So he learns how to step aside and let the warrior do whatever it has to do. You know, it's in a sense, it's like saying, let the will of God work through you. You know, if we understand this in a deep sense, it means, you know, let aside the thoughts, desires, and this and that are related to the personality, and let the higher will act. Let life guide you. So, in the rule number 8, there is some explanation about these two first rules, and it says, you can stand upright now, firm as a rock amid the turmoil, obeying the warrior who is thyself and thy king, and concerned in the battle, safe to do his bidding, having no longer any care as to the result of the battle, for one thing only is important, that the warrior shall win, and you know he is incapable of defeat. Standing thus, cool and awakened, use the hearing you have acquired by pain and by destruction of pain. This is really interesting for several reasons. First, the idea is you know that the warrior is yourself, your real self, and you can let that deeper self act through you. You know also that truth cannot be defeated in a sense. Truth can be obscured for a while, but it cannot be defeated. So when you know that the whole nature is moving towards reality, and that there is no way that cannot happen, then you have that confidence. You know that no matter what happens, nature will always win. Now, if we help nature, this will happen faster, and we will get to the state of bliss and perfection and peace faster. If we don't help this process, then it will take longer, and we will be caught in the realm of suffering for longer, but sooner or later we will realize truth. It's impossible for that not to happen. Of course, it's silly just to drag it, and stay longer in the realm of suffering, but ultimately speaking, there is no danger. All it can happen is that it will take longer. So when there is this confidence, because the person saw it, then there is that possibility of facing whatever we have to face with this sense, like cool and poised, without fear. So little by little we have to grow into this. Of course, we all may perceive part of this, but then when we are amid problems, we have doubts. We don't know, if things are going to work out well. We have fear. We don't like to suffer. So of course, we are growing into this vision. But little by little, that becomes clearer and clearer, and we develop this poise and this courage to go through life. But Light on the Path says, use the hearing you have acquired by pain and by the destruction of pain. The hearing is the possibility of understanding the truth. Like now you can hear the truth. And this is in a symbolic way. You have acquiring the possibility of listening to the truth. The truth is always there, but we are deaf, or we cannot perceive that truth. This possibility of perceiving the truth was acquired by pain and by the destruction of pain. Light on the Path says the experience of pain is inevitable. It's not that we have to produce it, purposefully, but it's inevitable. And by going through difficult situations and being purified by them, we develop the ability to perceive truth. In some other books, theosophical books, it is said, wisdom is the child of suffering. Of course, this may seem as something, pessimistic. Like many people say, oh, Buddhism is pessimistic because the Buddha, the first thing that he said is life is suffering, and he is focused on the suffering aspect of life. Of course, life has happiness and suffering, but there is a happiness that surpasses any experience of happiness or pleasure that we have here. So for a person that sees that state of bliss, he says, don't get stuck here. Even the happiness here is nothing like what the real happiness is. So life here, down here, so to say, the conditioned life, is essentially suffering. Try to get rid of the cause of suffering and go beyond. So this again, life is a succession of states of happiness and suffering. Every single human being is trying to run away from suffering and to be happy since the beginning of human history. And no single person can go through life without suffering because it's part of the nature of life. So what are we going to do? Are we going to just try to run away from it, and something that is not possible, that every single human being has failed to do? Or are we going to try to use that suffering to getting rid of the cause of suffering and thus perceive the truth? So when we go through life trying to live in a spiritual way, the suffering that we go through purifies us, makes us more mature, allows us to see and to hear. And of course, it's not that we are going to like it. We never like suffering. But at least we begin to see a purpose. And though while we are in the storm, in the midst of the storm, it's really difficult to acknowledge that purpose, there is something being inside that is holding us, because we know that there is a purpose. And as we go through this, we develop that possibility of perceiving truth, which means peace, happiness. Truth is always associated with these things. Well, not always. Perceiving truth at the level in the world of error many times generates conflict. But as we get rid of the error, then we can dwell in the truth. And at that level, truth is peace, happiness, harmony. Another thing that Light on the Path says is listen to the song of life. The idea is that now the aspirant is learning mainly, not through books, not through concepts, as we are going to see, is mainly learning through life itself. Learning from people, circumstances, learning by perceiving what is inside. So the first thing is listen to the song of life. And it says, there is a note that says, for as the individual has a voice, so has that in which the individual exists. exists. Life itself has speech and is never silent. And its utterance is not, as you that are deaf may suppose, a cry. It is a song. Learn from it that you are part of the harmony. Learn from it to obey the laws of the harmony. So the first idea is that there is an order in life, this harmony. We are a part of this order. We have a place in this harmony. When we don't go with the harmony, we produce disharmony. And this harmony is translated by our consciousness as suffering or conflict or, sorrow. So the idea is learn what the purpose of life is, what the movement of life is, and try little by little to get in harmony with life. As we do that, then we begin to see that life is a song, not a battle. But that's something that we begin to realize as we grow and acquire the ability to hear, to hear the song of life. And then there is another note to this and says, look for this song and listen to it first in your own heart. At first you may say that it is not there. You will say, when I search, I find only discord. When we start looking inside, the first thing that we begin to perceive is how our mind is restless, how it is always trying to change things, it's not happy, it's looking for this with desires or needs. So it says, you will say, when I search, I find only discord. Look deeper. If again you are disappointed, pause and look deeper again. So the whole idea is look inside in stillness. If you cannot perceive the harmony that is the very core of our being, be more still and look again. So it's a process of learning how to be still and look ever deeper inside of ourselves. There is a natural melody, an obscure found in every human heart. It may be hidden over and utterly concealed and silenced, but it is there. At the very base of your nature, you will find faith, hope, and love. This is also very important. It doesn't say that by having the right circumstances you will find faith, hope, and love. It doesn't say that by having money or a person or this job or you will find those things. At the very base of your nature, you will find faith, hope, and love. Because when we discover that, then we stop looking for that outside. It's like, we have a necklace. And one day we wake up and start looking for the necklace. We cannot see it anywhere. And we search the whole house and we don't see it. So we begin to be anxious. And that necklace was very important or very expensive. And without that necklace, what am I going to do? And we search everywhere. And we may spend the whole week searching for it. Until one day we look and we see that we have the necklace there. We had always a necklace, but there wasn't a mirror around. So we didn't know it. And then we know we have the necklace and we stop looking for something that was always there. It wasn't outside. So this state of happiness is our very basis. But we don't know it. We cannot perceive it. We are not aware of that level of ourselves. Therefore, we look outside to be happy. That's something normal. We all do it. And the idea in the spiritual life is little by little change that movement and begin to realize that happiness is not outside, that we cannot control the outside, that outside things are always changing. That doesn't mean that we should be, indifferent and aloof and, isolated from from life. We can relate to life, but without looking for something that is not there. Every enlightened being is full of love for other people. So it's not that we should become self-centered and say, I don't need anybody, I don't, all I have to do is to find things inside me. That could be a wrong approach to this, because people who really found the truth inside is people who are constantly giving. So finding the truth makes you more related to the world than before. But also at the same time, we need some time to retreat during our day or during our normal life, from time to time, to look for this harmony within us. Because it says, remember the first sentence was, listen to it first in your own heart. And it says, all beings among you whom struggle are fragments of the divine, and so deceptive is the illusion in which you live that it is hard to guess where you will first detect the sweet voice in the hearts of others. But know that it is certainly within yourself. Look for it there, and once having heard it, you will more readily recognize it around you. So as we find it inside, we begin to notice it outside also. So rule number 9 says something on the same plane, the same kind of attitude. Regard earnestly all life that surrounds you. So the focus of this part is to learn from life and to learn from yourself also. Not that level of learning, not so much from books, because this person already has seen the truth. Now has to become the truth. So books are always useful if they are wise, but after all, what we need is the direct experience. So the books are pointing out what we should do. Now, to know what we should do is not enough. We have to try to do that. And at this point in the path, the most important thing is to begin to do it. So there is a note that says, because the rule was regard earnestly all the life that surrounds you. And it says, intelligence is impartial. No man is your enemy. No man is your friend. All alike are your teachers. This is something that shows you the change of perspective, the change of focus in the person. Now life begins to be essentially a lesson. So there are anything that happens is part of your learning. Not necessarily learning concepts again. It's part of your becoming more mature, part of your becoming more aware of discovering. So you stop classifying things according to what you like or you don't like. You will like some things, you won't like some others, but you have seen how both things are serving the exact same purpose. So when we can see how everything serves the same purpose, then we can be more willing to go through things that we don't like. We still don't like it, but we see the purpose again. It says, your enemy becomes a mystery that must be solved, even though it take ages, for man must be understood. So that's part of the, why is this happening? Not only to see oneself, but to learn how we as humanity react when we are on this side or when we are on the other side. Then it says, your friend becomes a part of yourself, an extension of yourself, a riddle hard to read. But only one thing is more difficult to know, your own heart. Not until the bonds of the personality are loosed can that profound mystery of self begin to be seen. This is something important also. when we are too caught in our personality, in our emotional reactions, in our patterns of thoughts, in our interpretation of life and things, it's difficult to see beyond that. We all know it. When we are peaceful, nobody's bothering us, we are in a nice environment, we can see much deeper than when we are in a difficult situation. So when the personality is active, the emotions, they blind our perception. So little by little, the spiritual life has to begin to weaken the personality. And life will help you. If you want to weaken the personality, life will come to your help. Not that it's pleasant, because to weaken the personality means that the personality has to stop being so important. So for the most part, is something that the personality doesn't like. But if we are earnest, that is a blessing, maybe in disguise at this level. But in At the Feet of the Master, for example, it says, be grateful if the lords of karma regard you earnest enough as to bring you difficulties so that through them you can grow and discover truth. So you should take the difficulties with gratefulness in that sense. Again, not that you like them, not that you say, okay, I want to suffer a little, why don't you send something? But when they come, it may help to keep these things in mind. And again, when we are in the middle of the storm, it is difficult to consider these things. That's why it is important to try to think about all this during our life, so that in the moments of crisis, we have this foundation. So some of it will hold us. Then when the crisis is over, we will be purified, we will be stronger. And then again, let us try to understand life so then that in the next challenge, we have a stronger foundation. So it says, not until the bands of the personality are loosed can that profound mystery of self begin to be seen. Not till you stand aside from it will it in any way reveal itself to your understanding. The stand aside from it, that also can be applied to our life. When we are going through or we are experiencing an emotion, or usually it's an emotional problem, or a kind of thinking, we can try to watch the process like standing aside, trying to watch it as a witness, as we watch a movie. Again, if the reaction is too strong, it's very difficult to do it. It's like you are watching a movie. If the movie is kind of boring, then you are not very identified with what is going on there. But if the movie is very interesting, then you are absorbed by the movie. And if the main actor dies or is hurt, then you feel sad. And it's nothing to do with you. It's just a movie, it's not real, but there is this identification and you feel the same. So if the emotion is too strong, it is very difficult not to identify with that emotion and to be able to watch it from outside. But if the emotions are not so strong, then we may be able to watch it with certain equanimity. So we can start trying to do this whenever we can. And as we do it, we acquire more and more strength in this exercise, or skill. And as we do it, also the emotions will be not so strong. Again, during normal life, when we go through special periods, everything is stronger and more stirred up. But the idea is, let us try to learn to stand aside and watch like a witness of what is going on. And it says, then, and not till then, can you grasp that life, that intelligence, and guide it. Then, and not till then can you use all its powers and devote them to a worthy service. Yeah, I think he's talking. The book is talking about the lower self. So only when we can see and when the nature of the self reveals itself to our understanding, we can grasp it and guide it, as we were talking about the horse. So then at the end of the book talks about like the last trial that has to be passed by the aspirant until he's established in the real self, in truth. The rule says, let me read it and I'll explain a little bit. It says, inquire of the inmost, the one, of its final secret, which it holds for you through the ages. And there is a note that says, when the time of learning this rule is reached, man is on the threshold of becoming more than man. Remember that, when we are using man, we are implying, of course, men and women. Man is a technical term, or it was always, now maybe it's not using that term, but man comes, the English word comes from the Sanskrit. Most of the languages, the European languages, come from have some roots in Sanskrit, the Indo-European languages, and come from Manu. Manu means the thinker, and the ability to think is what characterizes humanity as different from animals, for example. So man that didn't have to do with the gender, but with the entity that is able to think. In Spanish, we have three different words. Man is, we have man, and then we have a word for women and the male. It's like if you say male, female, and man. And the idea in all these works, when they say man, they are talking about the thinker. So when the time for this rule comes, man is on the threshold of becoming more than man, more than a thinker, of becoming an adept. And it says, the next rule says, great ones fall back, even from the threshold, unable to sustain the weight of their responsibility, unable to pass on. Therefore, look forward always with awe and trembling to this moment, and be prepared for the battle. It is written that for him who is on the threshold of divinity, no law can be framed, no guide can exist. Yet, to enlighten the disciple, the final struggle may be thus expressed. Hold fast to that which has neither substance nor existence. This idea of the last trial is in all religions. When Buddha was trying to realize truth, Mara, which is the great tempter, came and tried to tempt him, to go out of the meditation with all kinds of things. Jesus also, when he was in the desert, he said that the Satan came and offered him things, also tried to tempt him to stop his path to the Father. And it is in most traditions that there is a final great trial, and Light on the Path says that the piece of advice that this gives is hold fast to that which has neither substance nor existence. If you see, the struggle is between the temptations that come from the senses. Satan offering Jesus all the glory, or this or that, things that belong to the lower world, and Mara also to the Buddha. The idea is that it seems there is a last attempt by the personality to engulf consciousness and retain it within the lower world. And Leadbeater and Annie Besant, when talking about this, I think they were talking about this particular thing. They say that many times the person at that level has to face a very deep and completely unknown sense of emptiness and isolation. They say that it's a feeling that normal beings never feel, and that is really difficult to stand. You know, it's a feeling of being completely extinguished. And actually that is happening. That is something that is going on at that moment. That's why Light on the Path says, hold fast to that which has neither substance nor existence. You can experience something similar in meditation, for example, at a much lower level. But for example, when you are meditating, if you get to a place of certain peace and silence, you will see how the hunger for sensations begins to awaken again. You want to move, or you want to go prepare your breakfast, or you want to, you need to come back to the realm of experiencing, and that brings you out of the meditation, even if you were having a very nice meditation. Because the lower consciousness is based on sensation. When the sensation disappears, the lower consciousness begins to disappear. You know, in our culture, we are constantly creating things to produce more and more sensations. The horror movies are always, you know, grosser and grosser. The amusement parks are always more and more, you know, exciting. The sports are always with more and more circus around. The whole thing is about stimulating sensations, more and more sensations, because we are the sensations at the level of the lower personality. So the spiritual path is to a great extent to go beyond sensations, not to feel. You know, remember that one of the first rules was kill out desire for sensations. So the idea is to be beyond the sensations. If we can be beyond sensations, then we are free, because something may produce a good sensation or a bad sensation. If we are beyond it, you recognize it. Well, I didn't like that, but who cares? You know. Now, if we are caught in the sensation, then when we don't like something, we are caught in that. We are not free to do what we want to do. We all experience this. So the idea is that this last trial is like the last attempt to retain consciousness within the realm of sensation. And what the person has to do is to let himself be absorbed by the nothingness, but that which has neither substance nor existence, but by the feeling of non-being. You know, actually, in many traditions, the true being is described as the non-being. And then it says, listen only to the voice which is soundless. Look only on that which is invisible, alike to the inner and the outer sense. So the last message of Light on the Path is this, you know, to try to begin to live in silence, in the silence, to live in this state that is beyond the sensations and beyond the forms, beyond the concrete, to begin to create a home in the realm of the non-form. And we can do that by having some moments to sit silently in nature. If our life allows it, to have some moments, you know, to meditate and stay in silence, or when we are waiting, you know, in a line, or whenever you can, just encourage little moments of silence. Just being silent, without doing, without thinking. Watch your thoughts. Your mind will keep thinking, but you are not thinking, you are watching in silence. So that's more or less what I wanted to share. I recommend to read the whole second part also, if you didn't do it yet, because it's very interesting. And of course there are things that are difficult to understand or relate to. But again, it's good to, this is the same tendency. We tend to read things that are easy to understand because we can create a form, an image. But as part of our growth is to read about things of which we cannot make an image. That develops this abstract mind, which is beyond sensations, beyond images. So we shouldn't try to always read something we understand. It's good to put our mind in that which is beyond our understanding. Okay, is there any comment or question?
Well, I certainly think that this series has helped me to at least get a better grasp on the concepts within the book. So if I go back and read them again, I think I'll see much more than I did the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one of those books that every time you go there, you can see something else, and that's a good practice.
Any other thoughts, comments? From the internet, if one is in a state of hopelessness, how does one get motivated to begin or continue to ascend to a higher, quote-unquote, higher state?
Again, there are two reasons why we could be in a state of hopelessness. One reason is spiritual and the other not, so to say. That's why in the first meeting, when we were talking about this book, we said this book and these rules are rules that are good for people who have certain maturity, who are really trying to tread the spiritual path. For people who are not, probably these rules would be something harmful for them. Not only that they are not useful, they could be harmful. That's why all these kind of teachings were secret in the past. These were all secret teachings, and you read them and you say, why are they secret? What was a problem with them? Even in Tibetan Buddhism, Dzogchen, which is a meditation where you try to go beyond thoughts and images and all that, is very similar to the end of Light on the Path. That was a secret teaching that very few monks could access to. They could access to these teachings after they have completed years of previous training, and it was so difficult to access them that many Tibetan monks were afraid that the teachings were going to be lost because they didn't have people ready enough to learn them, and then they were going to be lost. So when the Tibetan monks had to leave Tibet, and they started teaching these things in the West, at least to preserve the teaching for those who eventually can be ready to follow them. But then when you read these teachings, you say, why were they so secret? And they are secret because actually, for a person that is not spiritually mature to a certain extent, they can produce the opposite that they are intended to. So if a person is in a state of hopelessness and has no access, no possibility of accessing a higher perception, then that person is in trouble. The person should not try to follow these kind of rules, but to try to appreciate life, to try to develop, a sense of purpose in life. And at this level, for example, psychology can help us a lot. I think that, psychology has a very important role in our growth at certain level. Normal psychology, at least in my view, is not necessarily enough for you to go to lead a spiritual path. Because psychology usually, at least the traditional one, is based on making the self, what we call the lower self, stronger. But if you have not a strong lower self to a certain extent, you need to do that first. We cannot be spiritual before we are human, in a sense. We cannot be spiritual before we are a more or less healthy human being. So if the hopelessness is the result of a lack of incentive or inspiration, then probably that person should try to find the purpose in life at whatever level it is. But many times, the sense of hopelessness is a very spiritual feeling. And we should let that sense to consume us. And when that process is over, a new being will be born. So Krishnamurti talked quite a bit, especially in the first decades of his teachings, about this sense of isolation or loneliness. And he would say, don't kill it, nourish it, give it space, because that will bring something different. But again, it's something that the person has to, I don't know who is asking this or who this is about, so we should be able to judge by ourselves, where we are at.
I once went through a very difficult time, and what I did was I think what happens is if I read 2 books. One was Seek Out the Way by Rohit Mehta, and it explains the process and explains about the storm and what comes after the storm, and then it explains about this extreme loneliness, because I think what happens is we think that this is so different for us, that we're the only one going through it, and when we learn that it's a normal process of life, then that takes a little bit of the burden off. And then I read recently Annie Besant's article about the meaning and use of pain. And that was inspirational for me because of the fact that she explained our lower personality works in a realm of limits. So there's only so much. There's only so much money we can have, or so big of a house we could have, or so much of a relationship we could have. So we're constantly looking for more. When we can't get that, it creates conflict. And she goes on to say that is even the source of violence and war that we have, because we're constantly all trying to get the stuff. But if we can move past that and move to our higher self, or our that unity, that's limitless. And so therefore we don't have that conflict of trying to get something. And so thereby going through these processes that we're going to will get us to more of that higher state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very, very deep thing. When we are in the world, for example, let's suppose when we live in the lower world, people compete with each other to see who is more intelligent, for example. But if these people live in the higher world, so to say, the intelligence of a person doesn't, take away anything of the intelligence of the other person. As Michelle said, if we are fighting for money, either I have money or you have it, so we have to struggle. But in the world of the real, a person that has infinite love is not taking away the possibility of having infinite love from any other person. So I think that's something to ponder over, to see at what level we are living. And yeah, that's very interesting.
Also from the internet, could you expand a little bit more on the concept of the voice which is soundless?
Mm-hmm. There is this book, The Voice of the Silence, written by Madame Blavatsky. And many times, whatever belongs to the higher consciousness is described with this paradox. For example, if you read how Blavatsky described the absolute reality that is beyond conditioning, she would say the non-being, which is the one being. Or here we have the soundless sound, or the voice of the silence. Because it's something that belongs to a different realm. So it's neither a silence which is empty, with nothing there, and it's not a voice that is something concrete. You know, when we think of silence or emptiness, we think of that as being the absence of anything. But when you experience this silence or this emptiness, you see that it is full. Now, full of what? It's not full of things. It's not full of something concrete. So this is why there is the eternal argument between, for example, Hinduism and Buddhism. Hinduism describes the ultimate reality as Purna, which means fullness, and says the ultimate reality is a state of fullness. Buddhism describes the ultimate reality as Shunyata, which is emptiness, and says, no, the ultimate reality is emptiness. Well, Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine, when she describes the ultimate reality, she says, it's neither of them, or it's both at the same time. It's neither a conditioned fullness, nor a vacuum. So this voice, soundless sound, is a state of silence which is full of something, but not something that is an object, an image, something we can grasp to. So since it is not possible to explain it through words, because words are created to describe objects, they usually choose these paradoxes, soundless sound or voice. So I think they are more like koans, in Zen Buddhism they have these little riddles, and they are also a hint about what it is. But we cannot figure it out before we experience it, or at least before we experience an aspect of it. Because in Theosophy, it is said that the universe is like holographic. The whole is contained in the part. So you can experience all of this at a certain level. Then you will experience all that at a deeper level, at a level that is completely different from this one, but at the same time, you already went through that, at certain levels. So we can experience this soundless voice at certain level, and that gives us a small realization of what this can be, ultimately speaking.
Ready for more?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any books written as commentary on Light on the Path? And I can say yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Talks on the Path of Occultism, Annie Besant, and Leadbeater is one. Do you have others to recommend?
Mm-hmm. Well, the one that Michelle was talking about, Seek Out the Way, by Rohit Mehta, that's a book. I remember I read it some years ago, so right now I don't remember very much the content of it, but I remember that it's a more psychological approach. I don't know if you that read it not long ago.
It just kind of breaks the stages down and then pulls in the rules as it goes through. So it was, the first two chapters are what I remember most, but it was, the storm and then the loneliness and just kind of the process that you go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rohit Mehta was a very good friend of Krishnamurti, and he was a Theosophist also. And he does a good job of bringing the two together, bringing the basic theosophical teachings with a more Krishnamurtian approach, if you will. And so it's a more psychological approach. The one that you mentioned, Talks on the Path of Occultism, is more of an occult approach or esoteric approach. There is Joy Mills also wrote a book.
Seeking wisdom, or
Yeah,
no.
I don't remember right now the title.
I think it is Seek Out the Wisdom or something like that.
Seek Out the Way. I will remember later probably.
Yeah.
But we have in the library that book by Joy Mills.
Yes.
And I'm sure there are some others.
Seek Out the Way.
Seek Out the Way is also?
By Joy Mills.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, and also Sri Ram wrote a book that is called something with wisdom, The Way of Wisdom, I think, where those are recorded talks at the feet of the Master, Light on the Path, and The Voice of the Silence. I think it's The Way of Wisdom. Sri Ram was a former international president of the TS.
Yeah, and Sri Ram wrote quite a bit. And Seeking Wisdom was one.
Oh, Seeking Wisdom, maybe.
We have another question from the internet. What would be the ideal relationship between pain and attention?
They could be very good siblings. When there is Gurdjieff used to talk a lot about this voluntary suffering. There is a danger in that concept also, like in many spiritual concepts. But the idea is that if we are going through pain, if we can do it with awareness, then somehow the purifying role of suffering is heightened. So if we can pay attention to suffering when it is going on, then probably we are like letting the process be deeper. It doesn't mean that we have to think about suffering. That's a completely different thing. But when we are experiencing suffering, if we can pay attention to it, then that's something that is always said to be good. Now again, we have to be very careful, because if we are ambitious and we want to take the most advantage of suffering and pay attention to suffering with that ambition, many times we need a break. Many times we need to let go of, or let the suffering pass. So it depends on the situation, it depends on how much energy we have, it depends on for how long we have been with suffering. So ideally, theoretically, in abstract, it is always good to pay attention to suffering. But then we have to see how much we can really do without forcing too much the personality, and it can produce some kind of breakdown. Not that breakdowns are not good. Many times, spiritually speaking, they are very good. But the point is that if we overdo things, then we get the opposite result. So it's always up to us. We have to do all this in an intelligent way.
I find that in doing or being in a certain space, the word acceptance disturbs me, because okay, I will accept, but that could be procrastination too. But accepting where one is at, and maybe there needs to be a pause before, and being comfortable with that pause is not easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything is relative. That's why, when you see how spiritual teachers teach, if you see the dialogues of Krishnamurti, or you see the dialogues of Nisargadatta Maharaj, for example, they would say opposite things to different people. So one person would come and say, because acceptance is necessary and this and that. And they would say, for example, no, to accept is to be dead. If you accept it, that's because you are mediocre. And then another person would come and say, because we have to fight this or that. And they would say, no, you are fighting from your ego. You have to accept. And the point is not that they just want to contradict the person. But the point is why we do something. If my personality has the tendency to fight for everything, then obviously I have to develop acceptance. If my personality has a difficult time when it has to do something, when it has to face something, then probably I don't have to develop acceptance. I have to develop the courage to stand or to do what is right. So it's all relative. It's all relative to what our personality needs to be in the middle path. So, acceptance is something good in itself, but if that is tied to the inability to do, then it is not good. There is a phrase in the Mahatma letters that puzzled me for a few years, and the master said, evil is the exaggeration of good. And then little by little I saw that. Something that is good, when it is taken to the extreme, it becomes evil.
The heart is the core of our being, but how do we get into that deepest without confusing it with shallowness?
I would say that what is deep is always what is behind. So if we are observing ourselves, we perceive certain level. That is good in itself. But then we have to try to perceive what is behind. So for example, we see a reaction. We perceive a reaction. That's very good that we perceive it. But then try to see why are you reacting in that way. Not in the sense of analyzing. Analyzing may be necessary, but in the sense of, try to go always beyond and try to see the origin of it. So shallowness and depthness or depth is relative again. I may be at this level, and for me, something deeper is whatever is deeper than that level. For some other person, my depth may be shallow, or my shallowness may be depth. But the idea is try always go beyond. So then we suffer and we say, why am I suffering? Because I don't like this. Okay, now begin to see why you don't like that. Well, because, I don't know, I'm afraid that this will happen. Okay, try to see, why are you afraid? What is it to be afraid of? So I think depth and shallowness depends on, it's different from each person. If we try to go beyond or behind, we are always increasing in depth. And ultimately speaking, a state of silence is the depth that will take us beyond. Because a state of silence is also a door. It's not there are many levels of silence. But if we can get to the state of silence at our level, that will take us beyond